Alright. So, welcome in. I'm going to show, if you guys have been struggling to fly an Arma Reforger, I'm going to try and teach you guys a few little things that I think will help you learn. And today we are going to practice, and I advise you to practice in the MI8. Alright, you'll see a lot of people doing some crazy things in the Huey, and lots of people will recommend jumping into like the Game Master or the in-game training and trying out the trying out the Huey. But I actually recommend trying the MI8 because it flies much heavier. It flies much it's much more difficult to maneuver. So if you get the basics down in the MI8, every other, like the Huey and the modded helicopters and stuff like that, are gonna feel easy in comparison. So I recommend trying out the MI8. So I'm making this fully with the understanding, right? I'm gonna presume that everybody knows how to get into the helicopter, how to start it, how to take off on R, right? So I'm not going to go through the very, very basic things, because everybody knows that you can just get in and you press the collective up and you take off, right? This is the easy part. Everybody knows how to do this. Everybody knows how to do this, so I'm not gonna go through any details on how to do that. So the main thing I'd recommend is not to exceed like 45 to 60 degrees banking on any of the angles, because once you get closer to like the 90 degrees angling, you get into an unrecoverable state where the helicopter will just turn. It'll be like almost impossible to level it out. The only way you can really get out of these high steep banking is with a lot of speed and a lot of altitude. So what I'm going to want you to do is just go up and down the runway. All right, don't go low to the ground. Have a decent enough altitude so you can have room for mistakes. And when you get to the end of the runway, where you've got like the white blocks, you're just gonna pull back on the joystick, or you're gonna press S if you're on keyboard, and you're just gonna pull back, right? You're gonna pitch up and see what effect it has on the helicopter. You're gonna see our land speed comes to a halt, but we gain a lot of altitude. And of course, we've had one result that we wanted in our land speed coming to a halt, but we've gained way too much altitude. That's obviously not what we want to do if we were coming in for a landing, right? So you can do the exact same thing, coming back the other way, but this time as you pull back, you're just going to compensate by lowering the collective, right? Decreasing the throttle. And the aim is to try and maintain your altitude. So you're going to pull back and then you're going to lower the collective. Not too much, you're just going to do it enough. Just keep modulating it. If you lower the collective too much, you're not going to decrease your land speed like you wanted. All right, you're going to keep that momentum going forward more than you'd like, which is something you're just going to have to compensate for. So if you were coming in for a landing and you knew you were going very fast and you were going to have to like stay low, you're going to have to pitch back earlier than you would have expected to come to a standstill where you wanted. So just keep going up and down the runway like this and just pitching back, lowering the collective at the same time, and just getting a feel of what it takes to come to a standstill and maintaining a relative altitude. And then just turn around and do it again. And then once you've done this a few times, you can then incorporate a landing. Okay, if you're in Game Master, you can place down a helipad somewhere, and you can then come in for it, use everything you've just learned to pitch back and lower your collective, get yourself leveled out at a decent enough altitude, and then sort out your landing after that, right? And now we're nice and close to the helipad. We can now very slowly ease it in with very small inputs. That's another thing as well. I see lots of people trying to land the helicopters, and they know they're in this position. They know they need to go a little bit further forward, and they push it forward too much like that, and then they suddenly need to pull back and they hit their rear rater on the floor like that. It's a very common thing I see in the MI8s, and that's something you need to be aware of. Is that these MI8s have very large rear rotors. They like to do whatever they want. Another thing for the MIA, I highly recommend having the wheel brakes enabled at all time. There isn't really any like forward thrust that you have in the vehicle to move on the ground, so there isn't really much use for the wheels unless you're going for specific types of landings. So I always just recommend having the wheel brakes on, because when you do land on a helipad, you don't want the helicopter then rolling off. And even with the brakes on, you can still maintain a decent amount of rolling speed on the floor, even with the wheel brakes on. So I don't really feel like there's any need to have the wheel brakes on in Arma Reforger. To have the wheel brakes off, sorry. So just keep practicing that up and down the runway, and then start incorporating some landings into it. No turns, nothing fancy. Just come in from different altitudes, different speeds, and just practicing pitching back and lowering your collective and coming to a standstill above the ground, and then sorting out your landing. And then with time, you'll be able to do it all in one go. All these things come in time. Don't be pressured into rushing them. So after you've done it a few times, then you want to try and incorporate it in and get a nice, smooth, gradual landing in, where you do the same steps, but as you level it off, you decrease your altitude a nice amount to come to a standstill and land at the same time. And now your next step after this is you're gonna want to start introducing turns, right? And whilst a lot of people like to do big flips and flashy landings, there's actually a purpose to turning, and that is being able to land a little bit faster, and you can also see your landing a little bit better. You can spot it out the windows, because when you've been using the techniques that we've been doing so far, it's very nice and safe. However, you can't see where it is you want to land. So when you start incorporating turns in, you can then see where it is that you want to land and have a lot more precision in stopping where you want to stop. Another reason for using those turns is keeping that rear rotor away from the ground and able to maintaining a nice low altitude. Once you've actually got your slowing down to a T and maintaining the altitude, incorporating the turns isn't actually that complex. You're basically doing the exact same thing, except just as you start the pitch up and slowing down, you then start banking to the left and then use your anti-torque. It takes a lot of practice, of course, but once you've got those basics down of just pitching up, like I said, incorporating the turn isn't too difficult. It just takes a bit of practice to understand how much anti-torque to use, and adjusting the collective as well. Because what you will notice, it's very hard for me to show on the screen, is the collective has an effect on how sharp the helicopter turns and how fast the turning radius is. And you have to kind of modulate the collective to change how fast you want to turn. Of course, if you're doing some sort of hot drop, or you're bringing supplies in quick and you want to get in and out, you want to be turning as quick as possible. Whereas if I just hold my collective down, as soon as I let go of it, you see the helicopter pitch around very quickly. So when you're using your collective up, you actually gain a bit of turning capability. So you want to modulate. You don't want to just hold your collective down. You kind of want to have moments where, when you're wanting to turn, you release the collective down and get a bit of that turning capability in. After you've gained a bit of confidence, you're then just going to want to do the exact same thing, but rather than doing it at the end of the runway, spot a target. Spot a target with a helipad. Don't make it too difficult for yourself at first. Have a helipad in a nice, easy place. And just go for the same thing. Practice coming in from different angles, different altitudes, all that kind of stuff. And also try turning different directions. I have a habit of always turning left. And I end up having my right turning ability being a little bit worse than my left. And then once you've got the confidence down with the helipads, try doing it in some of the some more like dynamic locations, all right? Because not everywhere where you're going to be picking up and dropping off troops, I mean, majority of the places where you're going to be dropping off troops at least, isn't going to have any kind of helipad. So you're going to want to learn to spot fields, open areas, understand the width of your propeller and your own ability to be able to spot places where you're going to be able to come in for a landing and have the space to get in a turning without hitting your rotors. And I promise you, once you've had a bit of practice with these kind of landings in the MIA, every other helicopter is going to feel insane. It's going to feel like easy mode. And you're going to be happy. You're going to be happy that you practiced in the MI8 first. I promise you. Because in my head, this helicopter handles more... handles more like... it kind of forces you to fly the helicopter as if you would flying a real helicopter anyway, right? One thing to be aware of, especially in the MI8, is hillsides. That rear rotor, like I said, is an absolute pain point for this helicopter. So you've got to be very careful when coming in for those landings with any kind of verticality. Just to watch that rear rotor on the ground, because you might just slap it off of a rock or something. And that's the rotor gone. Now, this leads me on to the next thing I want to show you guys. And be wary, we're going to get a bit dizzy for this one. So we'll focus on the replay screen a little bit. Is you're going to find yourself at some point, no matter how much you practice, you're going to end up taking out a rear rotor, or it's going to get taken out by some enemy troops, right? All your passengers on board, they're going to start losing their mind when they start spinning. They're going to think that they're dead for sure. But it's actually quite easy to fly these helicopters back to base with no rotor, because helicopters don't like going in other directions other than forwards. So once you gain momentum like this by tilting, you just bank it to the side a little bit in the direction that you want to go, and you'll see it does a couple spins, and it really doesn't like going backwards, and it forces itself to go forward like that. Look, it just snaps forward. And then once you've got the speed going, I'm not pressing anything right now. I'm not pressing anything at all. The helicopter will just fly straight. It will only be when you start decreasing your speed that the spins will start coming back. So you just got to bank it in the direction that you want to go, wait for it to come back around, and the helicopter will do it all by itself. You just got to make sure you have the altitude to do it, because doing that low altitude is you're gonna have problems. But once you've got your speed, you can then set your course to get back to base and get this thing repaired. And I'll show you when we get to the base how difficult it can be to land it, but it is possible. Alright, coming into base now. And of course we've lost our anti-torque ability. Alright, so we can't use our rudder right and left. And we know that it's going to want to start turning us left. You can see it already. So you're going to use your practice that you've already done, that we've done earlier, to know when to start pitching up and slowing down. But this time you're going to bank a little bit right just to compensate for that left turning that's going to happen. And you're just going to slow it down, and then wait for it to start spinning, and then just don't panic. Alright, when it starts spinning, just keep the helicopter level. Just keep it as level as possible. And then just every time it comes round, spot your landing. And then at some point, when you're above the helipad, or you're above wherever you want to land, you've just got to commit. And you've just got to slam it down. And now you can get the helicopter turned off and get it all repaired. And now you've done all your practicing in the MIA, now you're going to jump in the Huey, or jump into one of like the modded helicopters, like the Cobras or the Little Birds or something like that. And it's going to feel like easy mode. I promise you. Like, this thing is so much more maneuverable, and the rotors are so much smaller and more forgiving for tighter landings. And like, you can, doing the same thing that we were just doing, you can just crank it and do like an entire flip. It's so easy. It's so easy to fly this thing. That's why I recommend not actually learning in this, because you'll learn how to do all this in the Huey, and then there will come a time where you're on the Soviet team and you're going to jump in the Mi-8 and it's going to be like you've never even flown because it's so different. But going from the Mi-8 to the Huey is easy, right? You're going to go from even just having like a basic competence in an Mi-8 to flying like a pro in a Huey. And it's the exact same. It's the exact same methods that you use for landing. It can just all be done a little bit faster, a little bit snappier, and because the rotors are smaller, like you can really pull back low to the ground with the Huey, and not touch that rear rotor on the floor. It's very forgiving. You will hit the base of the helicopter before the rotor, which is not possible at the Mi-8. But all the same principles apply. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys learned something. The main takeaway is, of course, like everything in this world, to get better at it, you simply need to practice. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.